Maya Thompson had always been a woman of routine. Every Saturday morning, she would wake up early, sip her favorite green tea, and head to the local grocery store. It wasn't just about buying supplies, it was her way of connecting with the rhythm of her small suburban neighborhood. The sun was shining that day, casting golden streaks across the pavement, and Maya felt a sense of calm as she loaded her reusable bags into the trunk of her car. She locked the car door behind her and turned toward her apartment building, ready to start her weekend chores. But as she reached for her keys, two police officers appeared out of nowhere. Their patrol car had pulled up silently, its tires crunching against the gravel. Maya froze, startled by their sudden presence. "Excuse me, ma'am," one of them said sharply. "We need you to step aside." His tone was cold, almost mechanical, and his partner stood close by, watching her like a hawk. Maya blinked, confused. What could they possibly want from her? She hadn't done anything wrong. "Is there a problem?" Maya asked cautiously. Her voice was steady, but inside, her heart began to race. Something about the way they were looking at her made her uneasy. They didn't answer right away. Instead, one of the officers glanced down at his notepad and then back at her. "Are you aware that we're investigating a robbery in this area?" he asked, his tone accusatory. Maya shook her head, her confusion growing. "No, I'm not. But what does that have to do with me?" The officer ignored her question. He gestured vaguely toward her car and said, "You match the description of the suspect." Maya's stomach dropped. A suspect? For what? She looked down at herself, wearing a simple denim jacket and sneakers, and then back at the officers. "I don't understand," she said slowly. "What description? And why? Are you accusing me of something I didn't do?" Instead of answering, the second officer stepped forward. His eyes narrowed as he studied her face, and then he spoke in a low, dismissive voice. "Don't play dumb. We've got reports about someone who looks exactly like you." Maya's blood ran cold. Was this really happening? She couldn't believe what she was hearing. "Look," she said firmly, trying to keep her voice calm. "I live here. This is my car. You can check my license plate or ask anyone in the building. They'll tell you I'm not lying." But the officers weren't listening. If anything, they seemed irritated by her attempts to defend herself. One of them muttered something under his breath, something Maya couldn't quite catch, but the other raised his voice. "Enough talking," he snapped. "Turn around and put your hands behind your back." Maya stared at him, incredulous. "Why? I haven't done anything," she protested. "You can't just handcuff me because you feel like it." Her words only seemed to anger them further. Before she could react, one of the officers grabbed her arm roughly and spun her around. Maya gasped in pain as the metal cuffs clicked shut around her wrists. "This is ridiculous," she cried out, struggling to stay composed. "You're making a huge mistake." But no matter how much she pleaded, they refused to listen. They shoved her into the back seat of their patrol car, ignoring the stares of neighbors who had gathered outside to watch the scene unfold. As the car pulled away from the curb, Maya leaned her head against the window, tears streaming down her face. How had this happened? She had gone out for groceries just like any other day, and now she was sitting in the back of a police car, accused of a crime she knew nothing about. The weight of the situation pressed down on her chest, making it hard to breathe. She thought about calling her family, but her phone was still in her purse, which the officers had taken. All she could do was sit there helpless and humiliated as the city streets blurred past outside. The ride to the station felt endless. Neither officer spoke to her, and when they finally arrived, they led her inside without explanation. Maya sat in a small, sterile room for hours, waiting for someone to tell her what was going on. Eventually, a detective entered and reviewed the surveillance footage from the alleged robbery. To Maya's relief, it clearly showed a completely different person. A man wearing a hoodie and jeans, nothing like her outfit that day. After what felt like an eternity, she was released, but the damage had already been done. Walking out of the station, Maya felt a mix of emotions swirling inside her. anger, frustration, sadness, and disbelief. She couldn't shake the memory of the officers' harsh words and rough treatment. It wasn't just about being falsely accused, it was about how quickly they had judged her based on her appearance. As she drove home, she promised herself one thing: this wouldn't be the end of the story. Somehow she would find a way to make sure others didn't have to go through what she had endured. Little did she know, her journey was only beginning. After the ordeal at the police station, Maya returned home feeling drained and defeated. The weight of what had happened pressed heavily on her shoulders as she sat alone in her apartment, replaying the events over and over in her mind. She couldn't believe how quickly everything had spiraled out of control. One moment she was just another person going about her day, buying groceries, unlocking her car, and the next, she was treated like a criminal. The injustice of it all gnawed at her, refusing to let her rest. Determined not to stay silent, Maya decided to take action. The very next morning, she filed an official complaint against the officers who had wrongfully detained her. Sitting across from a clerk at the police department's administrative office, she carefully recounted every detail: the accusations, the racial slurs, the rough handling, and the humiliating hours spent in custody for no reason. Her hands trembled slightly as she signed the paperwork, but her voice remained steady. This wasn't just about seeking justice for herself. It was about holding those officers accountable so that others wouldn't suffer the same fate. But as days turned into weeks, Maya began to feel discouraged. Despite submitting her complaint, nothing seemed to change. When she called the department to check on the status of her case, she was met with vague responses or redirected to different offices. "We're looking into it," one representative told her dismissively. Another assured her that internal investigations took time, urging her to be patient. But patience wasn't easy when you knew something was wrong. Every unanswered call and ignored email felt like another blow to her faith in the system. Meanwhile, news of her arrest, or rather her wrongful detention, spread through the neighborhood. Neighbors who had witnessed the incident started talking among themselves. Some approached Maya directly, offering their support and sharing stories of similar experiences. Mrs. Jenkins, an elderly woman who lived 2 floors above Maya, confided that she too had been stopped by police under questionable circumstances years ago. "They said I matched the description of someone stealing packages," she recalled bitterly. "I'm 70 years old and barely 5 feet tall. It made me feel invisible, like my dignity didn't matter." These conversations sparked something within Maya. As more people opened up about their own encounters with law enforcement, she realized she wasn't alone. What had initially felt like a deeply personal violation was actually part of a much larger pattern, one that affected countless individuals in her community and beyond. Inspired by this growing solidarity, Maya reached out to local advocacy groups focused on police accountability and civil rights. At first, she hesitated, unsure if anyone would take her seriously. After all, she was just one person trying to make sense of what had happened to her. But to her surprise, the response was overwhelming. One group, called Justice Now, invited Maya to speak at a community meeting. Standing before a room full of strangers, she shared her story openly for the first time. Her voice wavered at moments, especially when describing the fear and humiliation she had felt during her encounter with the officers. But as she spoke, she noticed nods of understanding and murmurs of agreement rippling through the crowd. People listened intently, some taking notes, others recording her words on their phones. By the end of her speech, applause filled the room and several attendees approached her afterward to thank her for speaking out. Encouraged by the positive reception, Maya threw herself into activism. She attended workshops, joined marches, and collaborated with other advocates to organize events aimed at raising awareness about systemic issues within law enforcement. Together, they drafted petitions demanding transparency and reform, collecting signatures both online and offline. Social media played a crucial role in amplifying their message, allowing Maya's story to reach far beyond her immediate surroundings. Videos of her speeches went viral, sparking discussions across platforms and drawing attention from journalists and activists nationwide. However, not everyone supported Maya's efforts. Critics accused her of exaggerating her experience or using it to fuel anti-police sentiment. Some even suggested she should let the matter drop, claiming that pursuing accountability would only create division. These criticisms stung, but Maya refused to back down. She understood that progress often came with resistance, and she was determined to push forward despite the challenges. As weeks passed, tensions in the community continued to rise. Protests erupted outside the police station, with demonstrators chanting slogans like "No justice, no peace," and holding signs bearing Maya's name alongside those of other victims of alleged misconduct. Local news outlets covered the demonstrations extensively, further shining a spotlight on the issue. While some praised the protesters for standing up against injustice, others dismissed them as troublemakers. The divide grew wider, reflecting the broader national debate about policing and accountability. Amidst the chaos, Maya found solace in the friendships she formed along the way. Fellow activists became her second family, offering encouragement and advice whenever doubt crept in. Late-night strategy sessions turned into bonding moments where laughter helped ease the stress of their shared mission. Through these connections, Maya discovered strength she never knew she had. She realized that while the road ahead might be long and difficult, she wasn't walking it alone. Still, there were moments when exhaustion threatened to overwhelm her. Balancing activism with her personal life proved challenging, especially since her teaching career required significant time and energy. Friends worried that she was spreading herself too thin, urging her to prioritize self-care. Maya appreciated their concern, but couldn't shake the feeling that resting meant letting the momentum slip away. Each setback, the unanswered calls, the dismissive remarks, the harsh criticism, only fueled her determination to keep fighting. Despite the obstacles, Maya held on to hope. She dreamed of a future where no one else would have to endure what she had gone through. A future where trust between communities and law enforcement could be rebuilt on a foundation of fairness and respect. And though she knew change wouldn't happen overnight, she believed that every small step mattered. Every protest, every petition, every conversation brought them closer to that vision. For now, Maya focused on staying resilient. She reminded herself daily why she had started this journey, not for revenge or anger, but for justice. The memory of those cold handcuffs around her wrists still haunted her, but it also served as a reminder of why she couldn't give up. Someday, she hoped her story would inspire others to stand up and demand better, not just for themselves, but for everyone. Until then, she vowed to keep moving forward, one step at a time. Weeks after Maya's wrongful detention, the two officers involved in her case found themselves assigned to patrol duty on a remote stretch of highway far from the city. It was a quiet area, rarely visited by anyone except truck drivers and occasional travelers seeking shortcuts through the countryside. The weather forecast had warned of an impending storm, but neither officer paid much attention. They were used to long hours on the road and figured they could handle whatever came their way. As night fell, heavy rain began to pour down, turning the narrow, winding roads slick with water. Visibility dropped rapidly, forcing them to slow, their cruiser to a crawl. The windshield wipers worked furiously, but even they struggled to keep up with the relentless downpour. Lightning flashed across the sky, illuminating the dense forest that lined both sides of the highway. Despite their experience, the conditions made driving treacherous. One wrong move, and they could easily lose control. And then it happened. A loud screech of tires followed by a sickening thud as the cruiser skidded off the wet pavement. The vehicle fishtailed wildly before coming to a jarring stop in a ditch filled with mud and debris. Both officers sat stunned for a moment, their hearts pounding as adrenaline surged through their bodies. "What just happened?" one of them muttered, gripping the steering wheel tightly. His partner groaned, rubbing his head where it had hit the dashboard during the crash. Neither was seriously injured, but the realization quickly sank in. They were stranded. The storm showed no signs of letting up. Rain continued to lash against the windows, and the wind howled like a living thing. Their cell phones had no signal. This far out, and the nearest town was miles away. With no other option, they grabbed flashlights from the glove compartment and stepped out into the chaos. The cold rain soaked through their uniforms within seconds, chilling them to the bone. Mud squelched under their boots as they trudged along the side of the road, searching for any sign of help, or at least shelter. After what felt like an eternity, they spotted a faint glimmer of light ahead. Squinting through the rain, they realized it was coming from an old cabin nestled among the trees. Its wooden walls were weathered and cracked, and smoke curled lazily from the chimney despite the storm raging outside. Relief washed over them as they hurried toward the structure, desperate for refuge from the elements. Pushing open the creaky door, they stepped inside, shaking off rainwater and stamping their feet to rid themselves of mud. At first glance, the cabin seemed abandoned. Dust covered every surface and cobwebs hung from the corners of the ceiling. A small fireplace crackled weakly in one corner, providing minimal warmth. An old table stood against the far wall, cluttered with mismatched dishes and rusted utensils. But what caught their attention most were the walls themselves. Scrawled across the wooden planks in faded ink and charcoal were cryptic messages, words and phrases that sent chills running down their spines. Justice will find you. No escape for the guilty. The truth always comes out. The writing varied in style and size, some lines neatly printed while others appeared hastily scribbled. Some looked decades old, while others seemed more recent. The officers exchanged uneasy glances, unsure of what to make of it. Probably just some kids messing around, one of them said dismissively, though his voice lacked conviction. His partner didn't respond, instead pacing the room and examining the messages more closely. Something about them felt intentional, as if someone had left them behind for a reason. As the storm raged on outside, the atmosphere inside the cabin grew increasingly oppressive. The flickering fire cast eerie shadows on the walls, making the words seem almost alive. Every creak of the floorboards or gust of wind sounded unnaturally loud, heightening their unease. Neither officer wanted to admit it, but they couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't alone. The longer they stayed, the more the isolation weighed on them. It wasn't just the strange messages that unsettled them, it was the memories those words dredged up. For one officer, whose name was Officer Grayson, guilt began to creep in. He thought back to all the times he dismissed complaints or brushed off accusations of misconduct. Faces of people he'd arrested, some rightfully, others not so much, flashed through his mind. He remembered the disdainful tone he'd used when speaking to Maya, the way he'd mocked her protests without giving her a fair chance to explain herself. Now trapped in this eerie cabin, those moments replayed in vivid detail, each one gnawing at his conscience. His partner, Officer Reynolds, reacted differently. Rather than reflecting on his actions, he became defensive, lashing out at the situation itself. "This is ridiculous," he snapped, pacing faster now. "We're cops, for crying out loud. We don't deserve this." His anger masked a deeper fear, one he refused to acknowledge. Unlike Grayson, Reynolds prided himself on being tough, unyielding. He had always believed that enforcing the law meant doing whatever it took, consequences be damned. But here, surrounded by walls that seemed to whisper accusations, cracks began to form in his armor. Tensions between the two men escalated as the night wore on. Grayson tried to confront Reynolds about their behavior during incidents like Maya's arrest. "Maybe we've been too hard on people sometimes," he ventured cautiously. "You think we haven't crossed lines? Look at how we treated her. She hadn't done anything wrong." Reynolds bristled at the suggestion. "Are you kidding me?" he shot back. "We were doing our jobs. People expect us to take action, not sit around second-guessing ourselves. If we start doubting every decision we make, we'll never get anything done." Their argument grew louder, fueled by exhaustion and the mounting pressure of their surroundings. What started as a philosophical debate turned into a heated shouting match. Accusations flew back and forth, each man pointing fingers at the other. Grayson accused Reynolds of being reckless and indifferent to the harm they caused, while Reynolds called Grayson weak and overly sentimental. The tension reached a boiling point when Reynolds slammed his fist onto the table, sending dishes clattering to the floor. "You know what your problem is?" Reynolds snarled. "You let these people get inside your head. You care too much about what they think instead of focusing on the job. That's why we're stuck out here in the middle of nowhere." Grayson stared at him, his jaw clenched. "And you don't care enough," he replied quietly. "That's the difference between us. Maybe if you listened once in a while, none of this would have happened." Neither man noticed the temperature in the room dropping sharply, nor the faint sound of whispers drifting through the air. The storm outside intensified, lightning illuminating the cabin in brief blinding flashes. Shadows danced across the walls, twisting and contorting in unnatural ways. Yet neither officer paid attention. They were too consumed by their own conflict. As midnight approached, the oppressive atmosphere became unbearable. The cryptic messages on the walls seemed to glow faintly, their words etched into the officers' minds. Grayson sank into a chair, burying his face in his hands. He couldn't ignore the weight of his guilt any longer. Every harsh word he'd ever spoken, every unnecessary shove or insult, he saw it all clearly now, and it crushed him. Meanwhile, Reynolds paced endlessly, muttering under his breath about how unfair the world was. His denial only deepened his paranoia, making him jump at every noise and shadow. By dawn, neither man was the same as when they'd arrived. The storm eventually passed, leaving behind a cold, damp morning. When rescuers finally found them, they discovered Grayson sitting motionless, staring blankly at the wall, while Reynolds lay unconscious nearby. Both were physically unharmed but emotionally shattered. As they were led away from the cabin, neither spoke a word. The experience had left its mark, forcing them to confront truths they had long avoided. For Maya, news of their ordeal brought mixed emotions. On one hand, she felt a pang of sympathy. No one deserved to suffer the way they had. But on the other hand, she couldn't help but see irony in their predicament. Perhaps the universe had a way of balancing things out after all. Whatever the case, Maya knew her fight wasn't over. While the officers grappled with their own demons, she remained focused on creating change, for herself, for her community, and for anyone else who might one day face injustice. By the time rescuers reached the cabin, the storm had cleared, leaving behind a damp and eerie silence. The sun peeked weakly through the clouds, casting long shadows across the muddy ground. When the rescue team approached the officers, they found them in a state that was hard to explain. Officer Grayson sat slumped in a chair near the fireplace, his face pale and expressionless, as though he were trapped in some kind of waking nightmare. His partner, Officer Reynolds, lay unconscious on the floor nearby, his breathing shallow, but steady. Both men looked like they had been through something far worse than just a car accident or a night stranded in the wilderness. The rescuers quickly assessed their condition and called for medical assistance. As paramedics worked to stabilize Reynolds, one of the rescuers tried talking to Grayson. "Sir, can you hear me? Are you hurt?" he asked gently, crouching beside him. Grayson blinked slowly, as if snapping out of a trance, but didn't respond right away. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. We shouldn't have come here," he murmured, his eyes darting around the room. "This place, it knows." His cryptic words sent chills down the rescuer's spine, but there wasn't time to dwell on them. With the help of the team, both officers were carefully loaded into an ambulance and transported to the nearest hospital. News of their rescue spread quickly, and soon reporters began speculating about what had happened. How had two seasoned police officers ended up in such a dire situation? What had caused them to lose consciousness, or in Grayson's case, appear so deeply shaken? At the hospital, doctors ran tests to rule out any physical injuries or illnesses that might explain their behavior. While Reynolds regained consciousness after a few hours, he seemed disoriented and refused to talk about the events leading up to their rescue. Grayson, on the other hand, remained withdrawn, staring blankly at the wall as if lost in thought. Nurses noted how agitated he became whenever someone mentioned the cabin. Once, when a doctor asked him directly about it, Grayson snapped, "Don't say its name. You'll make it real again." Despite their odd behavior, the media latched onto the story, painting it as a cautionary tale about the dangers of rural travel during storms. Headlines like "Officer's Ordeal," "A Nightmarish Detour," and "Stranded Cops Rescued After Freak Accident" dominated local news outlets. But beneath the surface-level reporting, whispers of something darker began to circulate. Some claimed the cabin was haunted, pointing to the strange messages scrawled on its walls. Others suggested the officers' ordeal was somehow connected to their past actions, justice served cold, perhaps even supernaturally. For Maya, the news hit differently. She followed the updates closely, her emotions torn between satisfaction and unease. Part of her couldn't help but feel a sense of poetic justice. These were the same men who had treated her so cruelly, dismissing her humanity and disregarding her rights. Now they were the ones feeling powerless and vulnerable. Yet another part of her felt uneasy about the idea of anyone suffering, no matter who they were. Was this really what she wanted? To see them broken and humiliated? Or did she simply want accountability and change? Her thoughts turned inward as she reflected on everything that had happened since her wrongful detention. In many ways, the incident had changed her life forever. It had forced her to confront uncomfortable truths about the world she lived in, and inspired her to take action. Through activism, she had found purpose and community, connecting with others who shared her passion for justice. But now, faced with the aftermath of the officer's misfortune, she wondered where to draw the line between holding people accountable and seeking revenge. Meanwhile, back at the station, rumors swirled about the officer's mental state. Cops whispered about Grayson's breakdown and Reynolds' refusal to discuss the incident. Some dismissed it as stress-induced trauma, while others hinted at something more sinister. "You know what they say about karma," one officer muttered, under his breath during a briefing. Another chimed in, "Maybe this is what happens when you cross lines too many times." Though no one dared say it outright, the implication hung heavy in the air. Perhaps the cabin had shown them exactly what they deserved. As days passed, details of the officers' psychological evaluations leaked to the press. According to reports, Grayson exhibited signs of severe guilt and anxiety, often reliving moments from his career where he had acted harshly or unfairly. He reportedly confessed to a therapist that he couldn't stop thinking about the people he had wronged, including Maya. "I keep seeing her face," he allegedly said during one session. "She didn't deserve what we did to her. None of them did." Reynolds, on the other hand, showed symptoms of paranoia and anger. He accused colleagues of conspiring against him and grew increasingly hostile whenever questioned about his conduct. During a debriefing with Internal Affairs, he lashed out, accusing investigators of trying to ruin his reputation. "You're all looking for excuses to blame me," he shouted before storming out of the room. His erratic behavior only fueled speculation that the cabin had left a lasting mark on him, one he wasn't ready to confront. Public opinion remained divided. Some saw the officer's plight as evidence of divine intervention or cosmic justice. Social media buzzed with comments like, "What goes around comes around," and finally, they got a taste of their own medicine. Others argued that their suffering didn't absolve them of responsibility for their actions. "Being scared doesn't erase the harm they've caused," one activist tweeted. "Real justice means accountability, not fear." Maya watched the debate unfold with mixed feelings. On one hand, she understood why people celebrated the officer's misfortune. It was a rare moment where power dynamics seemed to shift, leaving oppressors exposed and vulnerable. But on the other hand, she worried that focusing solely on their suffering risked overshadowing the larger issues at play. This wasn't just about two individuals. It was about systemic problems within law enforcement that allowed misconduct to go unchecked. If the conversation stopped at personal retribution, nothing meaningful would change. Determined to steer the narrative toward constructive solutions, Maya organized a town hall meeting. She invited community members, activists, and even representatives from the police department to participate in an open dialogue about reform. The turnout was overwhelming, with hundreds packing into the auditorium to share their thoughts and experiences. Maya opened the discussion by recounting her own story, emphasizing the need for transparency, training, and accountability. "What happened to me and to countless others is unacceptable," she said firmly. "But punishment alone won't fix the system. We need policies that protect everyone, regardless of race, gender, or background. Her words resonated deeply with the audience, sparking lively conversations about potential reforms. Ideas ranged from implementing body cameras and independent oversight boards to mandating cultural sensitivity training for officers. Several attendees shared personal stories of mistreatment, highlighting the urgent need for change. Even a few officers present admitted that improvements were necessary, though they urged patience and collaboration rather than hostility. Throughout the meeting, Maya remained hopeful, yet realistic. She knew reform wouldn't happen overnight, but every step forward mattered. By channeling public outrage into productive discussions, she hoped to create lasting impact, not just for herself, but for future generations. As the meeting drew to a close, she reminded everyone of the importance of persistence. "Change is hard," she said. "It takes time, effort, and courage. But if we stand together, we can build a better future." Outside the auditorium, rain began to fall softly, washing away the remnants of the stormy night that had brought the officers to the mysterious cabin. For Maya, it symbolized renewal, a chance to start fresh, to heal old wounds, and to work toward a world where justice truly meant fairness for all. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she was ready to face them head-on, armed with resilience, compassion, and an unwavering belief in the possibility of progress. In the weeks following the town hall meeting, Maya's efforts began to bear fruit. The community rallied around her cause, forming coalitions and working groups dedicated to pushing for meaningful reform. Local leaders took notice, and soon, discussions about accountability and transparency within law enforcement became a regular topic at city council meetings. Maya herself was invited to speak at several panels and forums, where she shared her story with clarity and conviction. Her words resonated not only with residents but also with some members of the police department who recognized the need for change. One such officer was Lieutenant Harris, a veteran cop known for his integrity and commitment to fairness. He had been quietly observing the growing movement sparked by Maya's activism and felt compelled to act. During a private meeting with Maya, he expressed his support and offered to collaborate on initiatives aimed at improving trust between law enforcement and the community. "I've seen too many good officers lose faith in what we're supposed to stand for," he admitted. "If we don't fix this now, we risk losing even more." Together, they drafted a proposal for comprehensive reforms, including mandatory de-escalation training, stricter protocols for handling complaints, and the establishment of an independent review board to investigate allegations of misconduct. The plan also included measures to increase diversity within the force and foster open communication between officers and citizens. Though it faced resistance from certain factions within the department, Lieutenant Harris used his influence to push the proposal forward. Slowly but surely, progress began to take shape. Meanwhile, Officer Grayson and Officer Reynolds continued to grapple with the aftermath of their ordeal. While both men had returned to duty after their hospital stay, neither was the same as before. Grayson struggled daily with overwhelming guilt, haunted by memories of the people he had wronged. His performance at work suffered, and colleagues noticed how withdrawn he had become. Eventually, he requested a leave of absence, citing mental health concerns. Some speculated that he would never return to policing, while others hoped he might use his experience to advocate for reform. Reynolds, on the other hand, remained defiant, but his defiance masked deep-seated fear. Despite outwardly projecting confidence, those close to him could see cracks forming in his armor. He became increasingly isolated, avoiding conversations about accountability or systemic issues. Rumors circulated that he had sought counseling, though he vehemently denied it whenever asked. Whatever demons he wrestled with, he kept them tightly locked away, refusing to acknowledge their existence. The disciplinary hearings for both officers finally took place months later, drawing widespread attention. Testimonies from witnesses, including Maya, painted a stark picture of their behavior during her wrongful detention. Internal affairs investigators presented evidence of similar incidents involving excessive force and racial profiling. For the first time, there was undeniable proof of patterns that could no longer be ignored. In the end, Grayson received a suspension and mandatory rehabilitation program, while Reynolds was demoted and placed under strict supervision. Neither outcome satisfied everyone, but it marked a step toward accountability, a small victory for advocates like Maya. For Maya, the hearings represented closure, though not in the way she had initially imagined. Watching the officers face consequences for their actions brought a sense of validation, but it also reinforced her belief that punishment alone wasn't enough. Real change required addressing the root causes of misconduct, systemic biases, lack of oversight, and cultural attitudes that enabled abuse of power. With renewed determination, she threw herself into expanding her advocacy work beyond her hometown. She traveled to neighboring cities, speaking at schools, community centers, and conferences about the importance of grassroots activism. Her message resonated with audiences of all ages and backgrounds, inspiring others to join the fight for justice. Social media played a crucial role in amplifying her reach, allowing her story to inspire countless individuals across the country. One viral post featured a photo of Maya standing alongside Lieutenant Harris, symbolizing collaboration between communities and law enforcement. Beneath it, she wrote, "Change starts when we listen to each other." As her platform grew, so did opportunities to effect broader change. Maya partnered with national organizations focused on criminal justice reform, contributing to policy briefs and legislative campaigns. She testified before state lawmakers, urging them to adopt measures that prioritize transparency and accountability. Her testimony often included personal anecdotes, reminding legislators of the human impact behind every statistic. By putting faces to the issues, she helped shift the narrative from abstract debates to tangible realities. Back home, the ripple effects of her work became evident. New policies implemented by the police department led to a noticeable decrease in complaints. Community outreach programs flourished, fostering relationships built on mutual respect and understanding. Even skeptics began to admit that positive changes were taking hold. At a follow-up town hall meeting, one resident summed it up perfectly. "It feels like we're finally moving in the right direction, not because everything is perfect, but because we're working together to make it better." Through it all, Maya remained grounded, leaning on the support of friends, family, and fellow activists. Late-night strategy sessions turned into moments of laughter and camaraderie, strengthening bonds forged in the pursuit of justice. Yet she never lost sight of why she had started this journey, to ensure that no one else would have to endure what she had gone through. Every milestone, no matter how small, reminded her that resilience and perseverance could move mountains. Still, there were days when doubt crept in. Critics accused her of being naive, claiming that systemic problems couldn't be solved overnight. Others dismissed her efforts as performative, arguing that real change required dismantling institutions entirely. But Maya refused to let negativity derail her mission. Instead, she embraced criticism as a chance to refine her approach, always striving to learn and grow. She reminded herself daily that progress wasn't linear. It was messy, imperfect, and sometimes painfully slow. But giving up was never an option. Years passed, and Maya's legacy continued to inspire. A new generation of activists emerged, carrying forward the torch she had lit. Schools named scholarships after her, recognizing her contributions to social justice. Documentaries and books chronicled her journey, highlighting the power of ordinary people to spark extraordinary change. Yet despite the accolades, Maya remained humble, crediting the collective effort of countless individuals who had stood beside her every step of the way. Looking back, she realized that her life had come full circle. What had begun as a traumatic encounter with injustice had transformed into a lifelong commitment to creating a fairer, kinder world. She often thought about the officers who had wronged her, their fates serving as a reminder of the complexities of human nature. Grayson, having left the force, found solace volunteering at youth mentorship programs, channeling his guilt into helping others avoid the mistakes he had made. Reynolds, though still struggling, occasionally reached out to former colleagues, tentatively exploring ways to rebuild trust. Maya understood that true healing came not from vengeance but from understanding. It was about holding people accountable without dehumanizing them, acknowledging pain without letting it consume you. As she stood on stage delivering a keynote speech at a national summit on justice reform, she reflected on how far she and society had come. "We are all capable of growth," she said, her voice steady and filled with hope. "No matter where we start, we can choose to do better. And when we do, we create a future worth fighting for." Her words echoed through the auditorium, met with thunderous applause. Outside, the sun shone brightly, casting golden light over the crowd gathered below. For Maya, it was a moment of triumph, not just for herself, but for everyone who believed in the possibility of change. The road ahead would undoubtedly present challenges, but she walked it with unwavering resolve, knowing that every step brought the world closer to justice.